Hi everyone, I hope you've had a good day. My name's Anna Charlesworth and I'm an assistant psychologist in the staff wellbeing team. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about support available at NUH after an ADH. So just thinking about immediate support, obviously managers and duty matrons are a big part of that. Chaplaincy, which is now called pastoral and chaplaincy and pastoral care, is another really good significant point of support. But I'm going to be talking to you a little bit more about SIS, which is held within the staff wellbeing team, which is significant incident staff support. So we were built to hopefully help a little bit more after staff have a potentially traumatic event. So potentially traumatic events are defined by an event that's involved actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual assault. And this can be either being directly involved in one of those, witnessing the event, learning about somebody close to us experiencing that, or actually just being repeatedly exposed to the material of that, and that's called vicarious trauma. So if you have been involved in a potentially traumatic event at work, the manager may refer the event to the SIS team. And that doesn't mean that you've been identified as needing support or that you've been kind of showing signs of stress or that you're not coping well, but it's just to show that you're involved in an event that might affect your well-being. It's really important to say that SIS is completely different to any kind of investigation or body within the trust. We're just there to look after yourselves, to look after the well-being of staff. We're not there to apportion any blame or kind of look at lessons learned or anything like that. We're just there to help staff's well-being, really. Also, obviously, all SIS interactions and emails and kind of conversations are completely confidential. Obviously, there's always a caveat with safeguarding risks for that. So obviously, if anything is disclosed that makes anybody worry about a person being potentially harmful to themselves or others, then it gets passed on. But other than that, it's completely confidential. So how do you refer to SIS? So hopefully it's usually, if possible, within the shift of it happening. So on that shift after an ADH, obviously ensuring safety of the staff is the #1 priority, and to carry out psychological first aid when needed, and we'll talk a little bit more about PFA in the later slides. Ideally on that same shift or within the following 24 hours, it's really good if somebody, either a manager or any colleague really, can collect all of the details and all the names of the people involved and send that across to us. It's always good as well if you can ask for the best way to contact people as well, because we know lots of people don't have access to their work emails on a regular basis. And just think about if they want like a home number or a home email address of how we can contact them. And then within one working day, what we do is we triage the event and think about what's the best response depending on what's happened. We have a couple options, so we have a chat back at the office and think about what's most suitable, but all of the options that I'm going to talk about today are all evidence-based. Brilliant. So within SIS, we're going to talk a little bit about PFA later, but usually after an event we kind of go down 2 separate routes. So TRIM is currently being piloted in a few areas of the trust. It might be something some of you have definitely heard about today from people I've talked to. Who's heard of TRIM? Yeah.
I know of it, it's in our area.
Oh, brilliant, yeah. So it's being piloted in 6 areas at the moment. And the other kind of direction that we can take in supporting staff after an incident is also called a CISM, so Critical Incident Stress Management Debrief. Has anybody heard of a CISM or been to a CISM? Nods? Yeah, brilliant. So we'll go through a little bit all of these in a bit more detail. So TRIM is a peer support evidence-based programme. It originally came from British military and has kind of trickled down into different areas, including kind of fire, police, and now kind of landed in the health service. And TRIM works to hopefully provide some really good reassurance to the people who've gone through a potentially traumatic event, normalise the distress response, and then again provide that just practical support and signpost to appropriate services depending on how the person is responding. Again, it doesn't take part in any investigation or portion any blame. Trim practitioners aren't therapists or counsellors, but they do really understand that importance of confidentiality. And again, just a really nice listening space for you to talk about what's happened to you and how it's affected you. Trim can be offered on a kind of one-to-one basis or as a group. We very rarely do a group, so it is usually more one-to-one. And as I said, it's currently being piloted in a few high-risk areas: ED, critical care, maternity, major trauma, theatres, estates. But if incidents do come in from different areas, especially if it's an ADH, then a trim response is likely to be initiated. So this is what trim kind of follows as a procedure. So about 72 hours after the event, we'll pair people up for a trim chat. And that's because we want to give people a couple of days to just kind of allow their emotions to drop a little bit, allow them to process what's happened to them before kind of going into a talk, like a talking space about it. Then it's usually a one-to-one confidential person. It's usually, ideally, with a colleague in your team, but sometimes you might be paired with somebody from different areas of the trust. So you have an initial chat, which is a really structured, empathetic, really just like lovely format to talk about what's happened to you in a non-triggering, non-re-traumatizing way. And then there's a follow-up to that chat as well, 4 to 6 weeks later, which supports that natural recovery cycle that we'll talk about a little bit later. Trim is really proactive, so it's offered to all staff involved, and that includes people who might not have actually been directly involved, but might have actually just witnessed the event. And again, it doesn't matter kind of how somebody's responding, it's just offered as a kind of a blanket to all people. So it's the event that triggers the referral rather than the individual person or people. CISM, so that's more of a group debrief. So it's a really lovely space for a team or a group of individuals to share their understanding, to share how an event might have impacted a person, impacted the team, and it really focuses on kind of group healing. It's led by a clinical psychologist and a member of the chaplaincy team who have undergone specific training. So they follow a specific process in this kind of group session. They go through what's happened, but in a really constructed way. So again, it's really focusing on healing and supporting each other rather than looking to blame anybody or kind of put anybody down in any way. And again, a CISM includes an initial group session, and then they'll have a month follow-up. Psychological first aid. So this is a training that we offer to staff and managers. So PFA is actually a globally recommended training for supporting people immediately after emergencies and natural disasters. It comes a lot from the World Health Organization and the War Trauma Foundation were originally kind of the minds who put it together. And then during the pandemic, Public Health England decided to roll it out across the NHS to support staff during the pandemic. Obviously, we're kind of at the tail end of the pandemic, but Public Health England and NUH decide actually staff continue to face really overwhelming, really traumatic things every single day. So we're going to continue to give PFA as a way for colleagues to help support each other through that and kind of negate some of the negative effects that you guys will come across on your shifts. PFA, a nice way to think of it, is first aid for somebody's emotions. It's a really flexible, compassionate, curious and structured framework really for people to support colleagues who have gone through something really frightening or distressing on shift. The nice thing about it is that it's usually delivered on the scene or in the same shift, and it works to just contain the distress, normalise the person's reaction and help reduce some of that acute stress response. The lovely thing about it is that it doesn't have to be delivered by a mental health professional. Anybody can train to deliver PFA. It's really, obviously we use it to support colleagues, but the skills in it can be transferred to anybody you come across, kind of patients or loved ones. And it's a 2-hour training, so we really recommend that at least one person from each team has a go at going on the training and just learning some of the skills. This is the model that we use for PFA. It's come from NHS Scotland. So because so many different areas use PFA, they all have slightly different takes on it, but they all kind of follow these main themes. With PFA as well, it's really flexible. So you can follow it as a structure, or you can kind of pick and choose which bits are applicable. So it looks at caring for somebody's immediate needs. So if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's about kind of food, medical care, shelter, clothing, just looking after the body first before going on to looking for the mind. It looks at how we can protect someone from further threat and further kind of exposure to the incident. So how can we keep people safe? And what steps can we take to, again, just start to contain some of that distress? How we can kind of comfort and console our colleagues or anybody that we come across in distress. Thinking about how we can offer support for practical tasks, provide information on coping. So again, just reinforcing those healthy ways of coping for connection, for getting back to normal routines. It also looks at the importance of connection. So we know that countless studies now say that if you are well connected following a potentially traumatic event, you're much more likely to have a spontaneous recovery and not go on to develop a PTSD following it. So we know that if we can reinforce that and kind of open up opportunities for connection, the person is likely to do a lot better. And finally, a big part of it is about educating about the normal distress response as well. Research shows that if somebody's been through a potentially traumatic event and they can have a talk, really open and curious talk about what's to be expected, what symptoms are normal, what's likely to happen to you for the next kind of week or couple of weeks. Again, it just takes a lot of the fear out of those symptoms for that person. And again, it just kind of gives some reassurance that actually the distress response is normal. We don't have to pathologise it so much. It's that natural human response to have gone through something frightening. And finally, in the middle of the model, it looks at taking care of yourself. So again, just reiterates that we're all human and doing this kind of emotional work is really hard and draining. So again, think about how you can support yourself after doing a PFA using kind of supervision and self-care and using the sources and signposts and materials available. So just talking a little bit more about normalising the distress response. So when we think about someone who's gone through a potentially traumatic event, it's really not unusual to experience a huge range of symptoms that kind of fall into different areas. So it's really normal to have an emotional response of sadness, overwhelm, shame, guilt, numbness, so not feeling anything, feeling quite low. It's really normal to have lots of physical reactions. So we know that people are likely to be in that kind of fight and flight response for the days or weeks after it. So kind of being hyper aware, kind of noticing just a lot of those kind of quite physical, visceral reactions like heart racing, tiredness, nausea, change in appetite. People might have quite a lot of physical ailments afterwards due to kind of muscle tensions, aches and pains. Then we've got kind of psychological reactions as well. So we know it's really common for potentially traumatics to impact our sleep. So that might be difficulty falling asleep or having upsetting dreams or waking up in the night from it. Again, dreams are a way for our brain to kind of begin to process what we've been through. And again, just kind of playing it over so it can make sense and kind of begin to put bits together for our brain to make sense of it. Intrusive thoughts are really common. Feeling disconnected, feeling on edge. We talked a little bit about that hyper-arousal. Lots of people fear kind of breaking down or losing control, or that fear that something else might happen to them again and that they're in danger. And again, just to reiterate that this is a really natural process. It's the event that's abnormal, not your reaction to it. We're all human, and this is our hardwired response to going through something frightening or distressing for us. So how to look after yourself after an ADH. Just remember that a lot of those feelings and symptoms, again, it's the normal reaction to an abnormal event. Lots of people can walk away and be really scared by their response to it and think, oh, it's not normal, or I'm going crazy, or there's something wrong with me. And actually, no, this is how our body processes things. This is part of that natural recovery process that we go through after a potentially traumatic event. Leading on to that, healing takes time. So the next slide talks a little bit about natural recovery process, but again, lots of people can go through these and within a few days feel quite frustrated that these symptoms haven't gone away yet, or they're not back to normal. And again, it's just about how you can be compassionate and patient and gentle with yourself in that time, because we know that the brain and the body is trying its best to make sense of what happened, and that can take a little bit of time. Connections with friends and families is really important. Isolating ourselves can feel really tempting. It can feel really tempting to pull away and just kind of want to be in our little bubble and kind of remain away and push other people away, but we know that that doesn't help with the natural recovery process. People who aren't well connected to community, friends, colleagues, they can naturally recover, but it is a lot harder. So again, just kind of allowing yourself those opportunities to share your experiences with people you trust is really important following an ADH. Try and maintain normal routines and staying occupied, again, is a really important part of giving your day structure, getting you back to normal life. Engage in self-care. So that will look differently for everybody, but physical, so thinking about staying physically active, getting out the house, kind of continuing to do the hobbies that you really enjoy. Psychological and emotional. So again, just kind of thinking about how do you recognise emotions in yourself? And when you do recognise an emotion, what do you do with it? How do you respond to it? What do you do with that? And how do you share that with other people if you do have quite a strong emotional reaction to something? And again, relaxation is another really important part following an ADH or a potentially traumatic event. Anything that will, again, remind your body and your mind that you're safe here and now, bring you back into the present moment, ground you in that kind of lovely mindfulness way is really important to prioritise that in the weeks following. And also just being cautious about unhelpful coping strategies. Again, it's really normal for people to kind of go home and have a few extra glasses of wine to help them fall asleep and things like that. But we know it can be a bit of a slippery slope, and we know that it's not always the most helpful way to help your brain and body process what's happened to you. Again, we've talked a little bit about isolation, so connection is really, really important. Other things to just be mindful of as well is anger and really intense irritation, and avoidance as well. So we know avoidance usually makes anxiety a lot worse. So again, if we can kind of, in a really gentle and compassionate way, begin to expose ourselves back into those normal routines, those reminders of the incident will become a lot easier with time. So this is just talking about the natural recovery process a little bit. So the majority of people will see a lot of their distress symptoms reduce within 4 to 6 weeks of the event, and that's called a spontaneous recovery. And interestingly, within that time, there's not always a huge push for therapy, because we know this is the natural cycle for our brain and body to go through after we've been through something really scary. In that time, there's a huge drive for focusing on symptom management, and again, just getting that person back to normal routines, healthy coping behaviours and things like that. However, if someone's symptoms last longer than that, that's when we definitely need to intervene and get them some extra support. Or if within that time someone shows really severe or intense symptoms, so any kind of red flags, so again, just quite extreme symptoms, again, that's when we would definitely signpost them for some extra support. This is just a little bit about accepting help is a sign of strength, not a weakness. In the health service, it's important to allow ourselves the same level of compassion that we give to others. I went on a training course last week, and there was a really lovely quote that I'm going to butcher a little bit now, but it said, the expectation that NHS staff can do their job and not be mentally and emotionally impacted by their work is the same expectation that we can walk through water and not get wet. And everyone was really floored by that, because it just shows that even if we're dealing with healthcare and we're not dealing with like ADH and all of the extra stuff and extra risks that come with the work, it does have a massive impact on our mental well-being and our psychology. So even without that, the work itself is incredibly draining and does have an impact. So obviously, with the extra layers of trauma on top, it's a lot more difficult. So signposting and seeking extra support. So we've got an employee assistance programme. Who's heard of Health Assured? Yeah, a few nods. Good. So Health Assured offers free counselling. It offers support for managers, legal support, financial, family issues, support for dependents in your household, webinars, workshops. It's absolutely huge. There's a really comprehensive package there for staff. It's a 24-hour confidential helpline as well. So it's a really, really useful tool to access support. Occupational health also offers counselling. Spiritual and pastoral care are a really, really lovely space to go to. They can come into your work or you can go to them. We offer mindfulness courses in the staff wellbeing team, so if this is something that you're interested in, get in touch. Nottingham Talks and Trent PCS are the local IAP services that you can self-refer into. They tend to take a bit more of a CBT approach to therapy. Obviously, your GP is a really important signpost as well. And on the intranet, there's lots of kind of staff wellbeing toolkits as well. So we've talked a little bit about, this is what our wellbeing team has to offer. We've talked a little bit about mental health supports. We also offer other kind of mental health training sessions as well. So suicide awareness, mental health awareness, stress and anxiety and all of those things. If you struggle to book on or kind of have time to come to any of those, we can also come into your team and deliver it directly if there's a group of you interested, so just let us know. Financial wellbeing, so Financial Wellbeing Toolkit is on the intranet. Serve and Protect is our credit union that you can access if you want help with savings or loans. Physical health support, so we can come and do health checks, weight management course, cycle to work, catch 5K, staff physio, menopause support, there's a lot going on there. And that's it. Here's some QR codes if you're interested in signing up for our mailing lists or anything else, but that's it. So thank you. If there's any questions. No? Okay, cool. Yeah, that can be sent, right, Sharon? Yeah, that's absolutely fine. That can be shared. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
How do you do the initial referral?
So it's SIS. Sorry, I closed it now. But it's SIS. So SISS at NUH.NHS. Yeah, and anyone can refer it. It doesn't need to be a manager, any colleague. But yeah, when you refer, we always recommend if you can just give a brief overview of what the event is and the list of names of people involved. Yeah, thank you.
What about if someone had an accident 2 years ago, but that sort of support wasn't there, and they still in the window and actually it was still effective for years on?
If it was a couple of years ago, we'd probably signpost them directly to the EAP and counselling, because if it happened a while ago, then that opportunity for spontaneous recovery is kind of lapsed. So again, a TRIM response or a CISM response might not be that helpful, and it might just delay the process of being signposted to the EAP or occupational health. So yeah. I think that's